guys, Virginia George here. I am pulled over on the side of the road a couple of blocks from home after leaving the gym this morning, so I can have a minute to share a quick anecdote story that really made some sense to me, and so I wanted to get it out there. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now with civil unrest, Black Lives Matter and stuff in response to George Floyd's murder. And I just want to start this off by saying, like, I live in Minnesota, so this has hit really close to home. I don't live in the Minneapolis area anymore, but I did until about 5 years ago. And so it just feels like particularly raw for me because it's people I know, it's my community essentially that's being affected by all of this. So I haven't said much online lately. I've been pretty quiet because as a white person who's never really had an active voice in anti-racism, I don't know always how to start, how to go about it now, how to be an ally and have it not be seen as virtue signaling or have it not be virtue signaling, right? I've grown up in a really white community and I haven't had a lot of experience with witnessing racism firsthand. And so it's taken me some time to kind of deconstruct where I stand and find my own biases in everything. So anyway, I've been doing just a lot of reflecting and listening and sitting with uncomfortable things. And one of the things that I've had a hard time understanding is I've seen a lot of people saying online, and in some groups that I'm in, that it's not up to Black people to educate us white people on these issues. And I find myself thinking, how am I supposed to know? Why can't I ask? Because I want to know, right? I want to know what to do, how to actually be helpful. So I have a story for you. So every night I have to make dinner for my kids, I and my husband. And there's one thing that they ask me every day that makes me unreasonably frustrated. Every night it's, Mom, what's for dinner? And it makes me really frustrated for a couple of reasons. The first is that everybody asks me. Last night, I think at least 3 kids asked me on separate occasions, Mom, what's for dinner? There are only 4 of them that are of the age that would ask. So I get asked Mom, what's for dinner? Mom, what's for dinner? And nobody, of course, listened to me answer the previous sibling who had just asked me what's for dinner, right? So answering the same question over and over again. But then the second part of that makes me so angry is that inevitably somebody's going to complain. What? Oh man, hey, can we have this instead? Can I have my this like that? They're going to basically argue with whatever the answer that I give them. And so I don't want to be asked because I don't want to argue, right? This is what's for dinner. This is the answer. Deal with it. And it occurred to me that white people asking Black people all the time, what can I do? How can I help? What's the problem? It's the same thing. People get asked all the time. So this has been happening. Racism in our country our country was founded on racism, okay? Our country was founded on people taking things that weren't theirs because white men felt powerful enough to take it from their brown brothers and sisters, right? It's how our country was founded. And then it was built upon the backs of Black people. Racism is everywhere, and it should be no surprise to any of us that that this stuff has been happening. So, and there's no shortage of stories, of Black people's stories out there. So the information's out there, right? Like, why do my kids all have to come and ask me what's for dinner? They could have maybe listened at the time that I told somebody else, or they could have looked at what I was doing and said, oh, it looks like it's chicken tonight, or it looks like it's waffles, or, you know, like, just kind of take a peek and see. Or they could just not know, I guess. But like, there are ways for them to have found the information about what we can do about what's been happening for the last 400 years is out there. There's no lack of stories on the internet or books in the library to communicate the problems that we have with racism. And I get that it's not as simple as, like, let's fix one thing, that it's very nuanced, and that there are problems within problems, and it's not as simple as just, like, fixing one thing. So I get that the answer isn't simple, but the problems are out there. They're laid out, and they're out there for anybody to find with a 10-minute Google search. And I get that, like, it takes time, and you don't know if you're getting the right information, but, like, look around. You've got time, right? Figure it out on your own. And then the other piece of that is, like, the arguing. And I've seen it come up lately too, where people, so if you ask somebody what's the problem, and they tell you, and they say, how can I fix it? And they tell you, and then white people are like, I don't know, I don't think that's actually the problem, but what about this? But what about this side of it? But what about, I don't like that answer. I think that maybe we should try this instead. Well, then, and like, as a parent, I can see myself saying, well, like, why did you ask me? Why did you ask me for an answer if you're not going to listen to my answer? And not that Black people need to parent white people, or that it's like I don't want to go too far down that analogy of, like, parenting, but it's something I can identify with, right? Is, like, people coming to me for information and then complaining about the information they give me. Well, then don't ask me. If you don't want to hear my answer, then don't ask. And I can see that happens a lot, you know, in this, like, journey toward allyship, is people not liking the answers that they're given and then trying to negotiate. And that's not how this is supposed to work. Listen to people. If they give you an answer, if you say, how can I fix this? And they say, do this. That's the answer. Do that. And if you're not going to do that, then don't ask them how you're going to fix it. Don't ask the question if you're not willing to do the thing, if you're not willing to listen to the actual answer. So I'm not sure always what the solutions are. I don't know the best way forward. I know that I'm really struggling with, trying to find my own biases and to work through them, and to realize that maybe I don't have the right to be comfortable. That Black and brown people in our country haven't been comfortable ever. And so to maybe sit with my feeling uncomfortable a little bit more, and, like, be okay with that. So I guess that's what I have to share today. The analogy of my kids asking for dinner and white people asking for, you know, Black people to shoulder the burden of education breaks down, obviously, at a point. But I can understand that feeling of exasperation a little bit better when I look at it this way and realize, one, it's exhausting, so mentally exhausting to get asked the same question over and over, and it is dually exhausting when you know that whatever your answer to that question is not going to be good enough for the person who asked it, and that you're likely going to have to defend your answer. Like, it's just mentally taxing. And that's for something as simple as, hey mom, what's for dinner? I can't imagine the burden that somebody would feel for feeling like they need to explain their right for existence, or the stories of people who have been mistreated or singled out as a result of the color of their skin. So, white friends, we need to do better. We need to be better. We need to be willing to be uncomfortable, to hear uncomfortable things, and then before we react, just sit with it for a while and realize that we have been afforded the privilege of being comfortable, and a lot of our friends haven't. That every day is uncomfortable. Every time they leave the house, they leave knowing that there's a possibility that they're going to have a confrontation based on their race, and that's just not okay. So, white friends, let's sit with our uncomfortability. Let's do a little bit more work on our own and figure out how we can support our Black and brown friends. I'm going to try and pull together some resources. I know there are some great lists out there of books to read, of articles to read, of people to follow that can help you along this journey. But I encourage you to maybe not comment on people's posts, to maybe, when you feel uncomfortable, to maybe sit with it and think about it and consider the fact that all of the atrocities that we like to think are in our history are not really that far in our history. Integration for Black people into schools happened like within my parents' lifetime. Native Americans have been taken from their homes and forced to gone to boarding schools within my parents' lifetime. There are people alive today who remember these things. And so it was not so far in our past. It was not, in the 1600s or the 1200s or the 1400s. Like, it was in the 1900s. It was there are people alive today who experience these things. So we need to be cognizant of that and realize that we're not so far removed from these huge racism problems, and therefore they are still being taught and being learned today, and it's up to us to figure out how to change that and how to stop that. So I'm gonna leave some resources in the notes for this video. So leave any resources in the comments below of resources that you found to help you deconstruct some of your biases, people to follow. Together we can change the climate, our cultural climate, but we have to do it intentionally, and it's up to us we as white people need to come alongside the Black leaders who are telling us which direction to go, and we need to be willing to take those steps and to be helpful in the way that they need us to be helpful. So the first steps in that, I think, are recognizing our own biases and working through those uncomfortable moments. So leave your resources in the comments below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.